It can just never be normal for Oxford United, can it? We're back 2 weeks early because the club have decided to do a thing. Welcome back to Walking the London Road. Connor and myself back with an emergency podcast. Like I said, 2 weeks earlier than we expected to be back, and you might be able to hear some fans going off in the background. We hope not, but you might be able to. That's because, if you're not aware, in the UK it's absolutely stonking at the minute, and sitting in our recording rooms, it's very, very warm indeed. But Con, we'll get on to what the club have done in a minute. Obviously, World Cup going on at the minute. How we've been enjoying that, mate?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been enjoying it as much as I can. I haven't been able to stay up like some people have, but we got England later, 9 o'clock till probably go until past 11, and that's well past my
Yep.
bedtime. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep. Former Oxford City man involved for Ghana, which will be very interesting. Him and obviously Anton Semenyo both proving that the National League is the bedrock of the British game. But enough about the pleasantries, because, like I said, Oxford United have done a thing. So, just to give you the timeline, folks, the season ended at the beginning of May. It's now the 23rd of June. So, for math gurus out there, I'm not going to give you the exact amount of time, but that's a fucking long time for the club to have done something. What they've done is relieved Matt Bloomfield of his duties as first team manager. They did this on, probably actually gave him his notice on Friday. It was announced to us as the fan base at 11 in the morning on Saturday. And we'll start with our instant reactions, because I know my first message, and a lot of the people I'm in Oxford United group chats with, first message as soon as that came up, Connor, was, what the fuck?
Yeah, I was away from the area. I was seeing
Yes, you were,
family
yeah.
I was seeing family top north, and I purposely stayed away from my phone. And then the one glance I got, I saw that someone sent a message. I saw you sent a message. I saw my other mate sent a message, and then I saw my old man sent a message. I was like, all right, what's going on here then? And it just said photo. And as soon as I opened it up, exact same as you. I think I sent to him twice. What? What? And then another one was bro, what the fuck are we doing? And that's exactly the words that came out of my mouth when I saw what had happened, because nobody expected this. And because, as you say, 6, 7 weeks down the line, if this was going to happen, we expected it would have happened 6 or 7 weeks ago, not 6 weeks before the start of the season.
Yeah. And that's also 6 days before the players are due back in to start pre-season. Although it appears that might have been pushed back now, according to a certain interview that we'll talk about in a minute. Obviously, Bloomfield only served 6 months in the role after being brought in at the beginning of January to replace Gary Rowett. There's been some kind of conflicting thoughts on this in the fan base, certainly among my mates, because some have said, yeah, right decision, couldn't keep us in the division and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, we all knew it was going to be an uphill struggle given the situation that Gary Rowett had left us in with the club, yet again with their sixth manager, going on to be their sixth manager, but the second manager they've sacked too late.
Yeah, I think that, well, in terms of sacking Rowett too late.
Yeah.
So yeah, they sacked Gary Rowett too late. Most of the fan base had turned by then, and it was only when Rowett was pushing it back on the board that the board knew that Rowett knew what he was doing, essentially pushing back onto the board, and then forcing the board's hand to make a decision. But most people in the fan base, most fans knew that by mid-October, start of November, that like if we're going to have to do something now to save our season, and they acted 4 weeks too late.
Yeah.
And if we'd have carried on, the season had gone on 4 more weeks, I think we could have pulled ourselves out of it. But we'll get onto the board, won't we, Sam? Because although this is a new board, it's not the two previous versions of the board haven't exactly been to, I don't really think, to the fans' taste.
100%. We are going to get onto the board because there's a lot of more focus on the board in this episode than actually the new man in the dugout, because I think that, obviously we'll have a brief chat about him, but it's those at the top making the decisions. Just to kind of cap off Bloomfield's time at the club then, obviously, as we mentioned, I think it was after Bloomfield had been appointed, or just after the campaign had finished, that we obviously mentioned about the fact that Rowett's performance or the result against Norwich saved his job, and then obviously then got a 2-1 win against Ipswich, and that, you know, that gave him an extra couple of weeks, and that's what kind of doomed us. Like you say, the answer I've had to a lot of people say, oh, you know, he didn't keep us in the division, that's why he had to go, is he did with us exactly what he did with Luton. The record, we mentioned it in our brief discussions before we started rolling, Connor, that his record, so with Luton, from the time he was appointed to when he was dismissed, Luton Town was 16th. With us, we were 14th. If that had been the case, if the league was played from that point, we survived pretty comfortably. And the board have decided to... So I think the idea that's the reason that they sacked him, in my opinion, that goes out the window.
Yeah, that doesn't wash with me either.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll talk about something I've heard momentarily, but give us kind of your thoughts on one of the narratives that, oh, you know, it's the fact that we didn't keep us in the division is why he had to lose his job.
Under Gary Rowett, we would have been relegated by March, and I don't think that's you know, that's not a wild thing to say. A red stripe and R would have been next to our name by March, and I think the fact that Bloomfield got us, you know, we stumbled over the final hurdle in April, and the fact that mathematically we got to the penultimate game of the season. And we went into we played a penultimate game, we were already relegated. But the fact we got to the penultimate game week of the season, bearing in mind when we were in such an invidious position of about 8 points or so adrift when he came in, he actually gave us hope. And it's a shame that, and he got us playing the way that we know that we can play, and that has been in there, and that we saw a bit last season under, you know, when Rowett first came in, and we're there thinking, why aren't you doing the same thing again? And unfortunately for Matt Bloomfield, in the history of Oxford United, people might look back in, you know, some fondness, but unfortunately for him, he'll probably just go down as a footnote in the history of the club while we've been back in the EFL. And that's quite a sad thing to say, because I think he's a good bloke. I think that he would have learned a lot of his lessons that he had from Luton going into the League One season.
Yep.
And, you know, with the squad that we have at the moment, assuming that we keep it together, which is highly unlikely because there'll be a couple that'll be picked off. But again, assuming that it's kept together with a couple more additions, it would have been top 6 at the very least. It's not to say that Aaron Ramsey won't do that, but a lot of fans feel a lot more comfortable, let's say, with Bloomfield rather than optimism and hopeful, I think, rather now than Ramsey.
Yeah. Bloomfield goes down as Oxford's 5th shortest tenured manager in our club's history. That's permanent managers, of course. Doesn't include like caretakers and others who had short spans. And I think he's the 3rd shortest tenured. Ramon Diaz. I think that might be a similar story as to why they were dismissed. Well, one of the reasons, of course, you know, there were a lot of reasons why Ramon Diaz was dismissed from his role. But I think, obviously, you know, just looking on the tenure of Matt Bloomfield at Oxford United, like you say, he made us believe we could actually stay in the division. I was excited for what a Bloomfield Oxford side could look like in League One. Yes, he made some mistakes. The way he set us up against Southampton was poor. I think that was the game he came out, or was it Norwich? I can't quite remember. When he came out and admitted he got it wrong. But at the same time, you know, I think saying he didn't keep us up, he deserved to go, let some of the players off the hook, because you look at those diabolical 2 last performances where we needed to win the games against Derby and Wrexham. He set the squad up pretty well, and the players put in 2 shambolic performances, which were the final nails in our coffin. That is our championship return.
Yeah, as I said, we fell at the final hurdle in April, and that was down to the players. You think, as you say, against Derby, Wrexham, also against Portsmouth as well.
Yep.
You know,
Hull, 4 drop points.
Hull, yeah, Charlton as well. Players, pardon the expression, they shat the bed in the big moments.
Which obviously is also what happened to Bloomfield in his the back end of the last season, or I should say 2 seasons ago now, because we're technically in 26-27, with Luton obviously going to a must-win game against West Bromwich Albion at the Hawthorns and get tonked 5-3. Luton fans were saying he did his best to keep him in the division, and he did the same with us. So I think I don't buy into, like, you know, you and I said, don't buy into this argument that it was the result of us not staying in the division is why he was dismissed. What I think it's more likely to be is that, what are we looking at now, Con? 2 weeks ago, I think, we had a new chairman appointed to Oxford United, replacing Grant Ferguson. And for me, the speed between Bloomfield sacking and the new appointment, that tells me that the new chairman pretty much had his idea of who he wanted to bring in. There's been a rumour recently from earlier today from the Watford Observer that there was, I think one of their assistant coaches had been in discussions with the club, but it appears to me that Dusan Bogdanovic decided that he didn't want Matt Bloomfield in the role anymore and got rid of him and already had his replacement lined up.
Then why is it taking 2 weeks? Do you know what I mean? Why is it taking 2 or 3 weeks? Like, if it was going to be something along that lines, there was a change around in the board. There's been a change around in personnel, and it's someone that Eric Thohirs, he's very close with him as well previously. I think that while a lot of fans would have been taken aback about the swift and the speed at which it happened, I think you could have maybe understood it a little bit more and said, this new man, he's got his own guy. We're going to bring him in and we're going to start fresh. But it's the fact he's waited 2 weeks. So there's been a lot of rumours about what's been happening and a lot of ideas, some which make sense, some which not. You know, whether they didn't work out. But as we said from the top, there was a lot of speculation as to whether it was a walking out, but it was a sacking. So allegedly something's happened within the club, you know, for this circumstance to come about.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it should have been, if they were going to get rid of him, they would have Bogdanovic would have got rid of him as soon as he came through the door.
So there's 2 things to add on to that from my point of view. The first is that whether, you know, I think it was a week ago now, or maybe just less than 2 weeks, but just over a week, that I think Scott Mitchell left his role as obviously head of recruitment. And we're yet to hear about an official announcement of a new head of recruitment, I think. It's still just Ed Waldron as head of football operations. The other thing is, I was told by a source, what was it? I think it was the Saturday afternoon, after the day that Bloomfield was sacked in the afternoon, I was told that there had been a disagreement over the budget available to the club for signings, that Bloomfield wasn't very happy with it, and that there were conversations that were had that obviously subsequently led to his sacking. Now, another source has been unable to... Yeah, that's alleged. Another source has been unable to confirm to me whether this did or did not happen. So take that, you know, what that first source told me with a pinch of salt. They did stress to me they feel it would be unlikely if that happened, given the demeanour that Bloomfield had and his reaction to being dismissed. So these are all, you know, all rumours swirling, because, you know, we're never probably ever going to know what actually happened until Matt Bloomfield come and does an interview somewhere. Matt, you'd be absolutely welcome on Walking the London Road to spill the beans. But that's enough of obviously talking about the man who has departed. Like we said, you know, thank you for what you did in the job, Matt. His replacement is former Arsenal, Juventus, Cardiff, Nice and Pumas player Aaron Ramsey. It's going to be a matchup of the Wenger disciples when we play Luton Connor, kick us off. What was your initial reaction? Because obviously, as we mentioned, this moved so quickly between Bloomfield being sacked and Ramsey being appointed. What was your reaction when you heard that Ramsey's name swirl around? Because, we talked about in the chat that obviously John Terry is always mentioned in these conversations. Dave Chandler had obviously left Stockport. Carl Robinson had been sacked by Salford. So there was a fair number of managers kind of available.
See, I thought that because we sacked Bloomfield, I just immediately thought that we were gonna move swift, and we had already identified a man. And I'll be honest, I thought that was going to be a Challoner or someone like that. Coming to a club that has shown that it can get into the Championship and it can stay there, and it hopefully had a bit of money to spend. But that might if your sources are correct, that's a bit different. And by the way, sacking 3 managers in 18 months, I'm sure that's going to eat into PSR and financial fair play. Yeah. So good job, guys. That's going to look good on the books. And the
January transfer window, and building a new fucking stadium.
Exactly. Yep. The amount of money that they've spent on sacking managers could have been spent on probably a good £2-3 million player.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
But when Ramsey's name was mentioned, I didn't really think much of it. I didn't really have an opinion. And then I've been thinking about it a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming round to the idea of Aaron Ramsey for the fact that, A, it's his first job. I think he's a man that's built to be a coach and to be a head coach. Do you know what? When he was at Cardiff, I actually think he did okay, given the circumstances. From what I've read, he's always been very interested into coaching. He fits into that role like a hand into a glove. I think he's going to come with new ideas on how he wants to play. It's just going to be a case of either identifying the players or getting the players to play into the system that he wants. What that will be, don't know. I think it's really, really harsh at this moment to already have preconceptual thoughts about Ramsey, saying that we're absolutely, we're buggered, we're fucked because he hasn't had any experience. The last few managers that we've had in their own way, we've given opportunities to, and a lot of managers in the EFL recently, young British managers, have, they've been given a chance by EFL clubs and they've gone on to do great things. I think of the likes of Skubala, Liam Manning as well. Even we gave him an opportunity after he was sacked from MK Dons. So
Brian Barry Murphy, obviously,
Brian Barry Murphy,
jobs, and then obviously Cardiff gave him a shot.
Yeah, Chris Davies as well. It's not a bad thing. At some point, you're going to have to give managers opportunities, and we do have a track record of giving new young managers either to the league or to the whole or to the game itself as a head coach opportunity. So I'm feeling optimistic. Notice how I say optimistic, not confident, like I would have been with Bloomfield.
Yeah, that's the main thing for me. Look, I respect Aaron Ramsey's career. I think some of the choices he made in his career are really interesting, and like I say, kind of do lean into the idea he was exploring coaching, all that kind of thing. Obviously, he spent a reasonable amount of time in Italy with Juventus. Towards the back end of his career, spent, I think it was a total of about a year, in Mexico. In France with Nice. So these are good kind of learning opportunities in seeing what's, exploring different football cultures and taking different influences. Obviously, Arsene Wenger was a big mentor of his as well. So from that perspective, I do think it's an interesting appointment. And also I understand that managers have to get their first job somewhere. Most of the time it's in the National League or League Two. I do think there's a little bit of, he's a big name, so he's more likely to get a job. Look at Lampard, look at Gerrard. Their first jobs, they didn't start like Robbie Savage did down in the down in non-league football, like Sol Campbell had to. So, or even like Ashley Cole's done over in Serie B, I think it is, or Serie C, I can't remember. But definitely the lower leagues of Italian football. So, from that perspective, like I said, I understand that managers have to get their first job somewhere. For me, it's more the fact that we've replaced a EFL proven manager, or at least a manager who had actual, years in management under his belt, for someone in their first job. It's a big risk, and in a season where the expectation from the fan base, and I'd imagine from the club, is to go straight back up. Now, look, some people have argued to me, if you're requiring EFL proven, then Des wasn't. Des has spent a lot of time in management. Bloomfield had good times at, I think, at Colchester, at Wickham, obviously, and even though they got relegated, we've already talked about his spell at Luton. So replacing this proven experience with a manager in their first job just doesn't sit right with me. And like I say, I will back Aaron Ramsey. It'll take a little bit of time for me to get fully on board because of the risk we've taken. And like you said, the money we've shelled out, and we still will be shelling out for Dez's contract, for Rowett's contract, for Bloomfield's contract, still paying them off while Aaron Ramsey is now in post. I'm on the sceptical side of things. I've got another point to make in a minute, but is there any, obviously he's the EFL expert around these parts, is there any positives you take from, obviously he had 3 games in charge of Cardiff after their manager was sacked in their relegation campaign, got 2 draws and a loss. Now, from memory, they were really good against us, but I'm not sure whether to put that down to the Cardiff manager being sacked and therefore the players going, oh yeah, let's actually play football now, or are players on the day just being particularly shit, and obviously Brannigan scoring a thunder bastard to snatch the point.
A bit of both, and he's a Cardiff boy as well, so I'm sure that he would have had extra motivation to motivate the players and get them, because they were in there. They were absolutely desperate at that point, Cardiff City. I just want to say, Sam, it would be interesting to get a Luton Town fans' perspective, because obviously they sacked Matt Bloomfield in League One, and then they brought in another Arsenal legend who hadn't had a top gig before. He'd had coaching roles with U Team and being Thohirs assistant manager at Norwich. Mm-hmm. But he hadn't had head coach experience, so it would be interesting to get their perspectives and how they were feeling, bringing in a man who hadn't had any head coach experience. I guess it would be a little bit different because they were in the first third of the season and not at the start of the season. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's just very little. There's Cardiff, they were already a lost cause, and it was more of their management, at the top, getting rid of Rizza, I think it was Omar Rizza at the time that they did. It was a bit ludicrous getting rid of him, 3 games towards the end of the season when he should have been sacked about 10 games before that. But just with the pressure that you mentioned that will be on Ramsey, I think that you're right. There is an expectation, I think, from the fans that there will be an immediate push back for promotion. That's shown in season ticket sales. But if it doesn't work for Ramsey, it will be, obviously he will get a bit of flack, but most of the flack will turn upstairs very, very quickly, and it will be, this is on you, what have you done? But again, we'll come to that in a second, won't we?
Yes, we will. So just to round off the Aaron Ramsey chat, like we said, there's not an awful lot we can say on him because he hasn't got substantial managerial experience to kind of cover. We can't look at a sustained run of fixtures he was in charge of or anything like that, or how his sides might want to play. In his interview, he's talked about the basics that you expect here in every manager's first interview. Hard work, front foot, aggressive, all this kind of stuff. Connection with the fan base, all that kind of stuff. I'll say as a part Welshman, it's quite cool to see a Welshman in charge of my football club, but at the same time, like I said, there's also a bit of skepticism about the appointment. We'll leave it there on Ramsey because, like we said, there's not an awful lot we can say about him. We just, obviously wish him the best of luck because if he succeeds, our club succeeds. Although, like we say, it's just at the moment in time, it's very up in the air, and I'm sure we'll get down the line on whether having Aaron Ramsey in post will mean we're able to attract more/better players than if Bloomfield was still in post or whatever. I think what we can rule out is we're not going to be getting some Arsenal loanees, because that's not happened at Arsenal. I don't think it will happen with us like it did with Frank at Derby.
Also, Sam, before
I think it was at Villa.
Yeah. Also, Sam, before we go on, have you ever seen just a more glaringly obvious first game of the season, 12:30 kickoff? Luton against Oxford.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I think that's going to be, like, Sky Sports are going to have an absolute field day with that. That's another one. I think they're like small things. It's why, like, I never wanted John Terry. I never wanted Frank Lampard, because it would be, we go from being Oxford United to insert players Oxford United. Like, I'm sure Luton have had the same thing with Wilshere.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute field day for the media, especially if he gets off to a good, they're not going to want a mediocre start anyway. It's either going to want to be a brilliant start or an absolutely horrendous start. So yeah. But I've never seen a more 100% 12:30 kickoff on opening day. But anyway,
and you also know that as soon as if Brian Barry Murphy gets dismissed, the first rumours will be for Aaron Ramsey to step in. I can just see that coming if Brian Barry Murphy doesn't get off to a good start next season with Cardiff. Anyway, right. Let's turn our attention to upstairs, because, like we said, I mean, this is something that Con and I have been talking about having for this discussion for a long time, because there's so many questionable things going on at the top of our football club, and I think like I mentioned, the speed at which they sacked Bloomfield and then had his replacement ready to go literally a handful of days later. I think with Rowett, wasn't he, like, he was announced a day after they sacked Des, or was it it wasn't very long after they sacked Des, they had Rowett in the door, and this feels like a similar type of thing. The other thing this reminds me of, and look, potentially what you said earlier about kind of why this hadn't been done earlier sort of weighed down the possibility of this happening. My first thought when I saw Ramsey being Bogdanovic's first appointment was reminding me of Tom Wagner's first appointment at Birmingham. Replaces Eustace, who was a good AFL manager, and replacing him with a big name in Wayne Rooney. Con, where do we want to start with the board?
I don't know. There's been so many iterations of this board under the ownership of Thohirs when he's had majority ownership. I've been telling man for years, like, this board is sketchy. Like, a lot of this lot don't know what they're doing, and it just comes across like that. It just comes across that someone who's ever making these decisions at this club, whether it comes to hiring, firing, pre-season tours, or whether it comes to whether it comes to the player budget, whether it comes to how we communicate, whether it comes to season ticket prices, whether it comes to how we're even allocating away tickets now, even when it comes to things don't run through admin properly, that fans are pointing out things that are wrong on social media posts, or twice in a season that we've posted our financial reports late. It renders me speechless. I don't know how to run a business, but fans have a pretty good idea now, like, of how things should be run in terms of admin. They know good and bad admin when they see it, and a lot of it is shit. Like, they've made gambles, right? They made a gamble with Des, and they pulled it out the bag. And even they admitted, even at the time, Tim Williams said, and Grant Ferguson at the time, we're 2 years ahead of schedule, but we're here to stay. And then 18 months later, their story changes. Oh, well, our target was Championship football by 2027. Well, that means, son, that you've got this season to get Championship football, or else you have failed. So, and it's also the fact now that, also, I'd like to point out just quickly before I get on to the other bit, where's Tim Williams? Like, he's been very, very quiet over the past 6 months or so. I haven't heard a peep from him. Since Dusan's come in, we've heard one thing from him. One line, one post, probably about 3 or 4 paragraphs. That was a week after he came in. We don't know who this guy is. We don't know what he looks like. We don't know what he stands for. We don't know what way he wants the club to go. We don't know what type of players that he wants. We don't know what his actual experience is in football, and especially in English football, which we all know is zero. And we would like him to at least come out and say something along those lines. And what relationship he has with Eric Thohir to be able to come in and think that he can just get the ball rolling straight away. And now we get on to Eric Thohir. Since he's, we've known that he's taken more control in terms of hiring and firing managers and what goes on in the club. He's not a silly man. He's very, very successful in what he does. That's why he's in the Indonesian government. He's head of the Indonesian FA. That's why he's looking at trying to put together at some point in the future an Indonesian bid for the World Cup, along with a few other countries in that region. But you look at it and you think, this man has hired and fired. It must be what he's fired Rowett. He's hired Bloomfield. He's now
They're
also
on to their 6th manager. Obviously, they inherited Carl Robinson when he and Henry Bakary took majority control in September 2022. They're on their 6th manager.
Yeah, and that's true. But I'm talking now while he's had sole control of the club.
Oh, okay.
And he's hired Bloomfield. He sacked Bloomfield, and now he's also given approval to hire Ramsey. It gives very It gives very Watford vibes, very Abramovich vibes, and I don't like it one bit.
Yeah, 100%.
One of my big fears is, like, remember when Appleton came in, and then Mark Ashton and Darryl Lewis came in, and we thought, okay, yeah, let's give it a go, and it was absolutely shit for about 4 or 5 months, and we thought we could actually get relegated back out of the Football League. And it's only when they started to get it together that, it pulled through. So a lot of fans have been correct. This could either pull one right out the bag for the board, or it could go to absolute Honktown.
So there's a couple of things on this. The first is that, so like I mentioned, since Eric Thohir has had a controlling stake, not the majority, a controlling stake in September 2022, Aaron Ramsey is their 6th manager in not even 4 years, in about 3.5 years. And 2 of the managers, they have pretty much admitted they sacked too late, that being Carl Robinson and Gary Rowett. Now, they also have given lengthy contracts to, like we said, Des Buckingham. I think Des signed a 3.5-year contract. Rowett signed a 2.5-year contract. Bloomfield's contract was, I think, at least 2.5 years. We don't know how long Aaron Ramsey's contract is yet. But the payoff for those 3 managers that we're still doing, by the way, even though Rowett's had a new job and Rowett's had a new job, Des has had a new job, and obviously Bloomfield, we'll wait and see. That's 6 managers in 3.5 years. That's not sustainable. Like you said, that's at the minute they're on a run of 2 managers a year.
Do you know the last time we had a manager that saw out a full season? 2021, 2022.
I was going to say, it would have been KR's last full campaign.
5 years ago, Sam. 4 seasons ago. 4.5 seasons. Well, yeah, 5 seasons ago.
Yeah, 5 seasons ago. And what's mad is that our football club has always been, we like to build around, obviously Appleton's stay wasn't lengthy, but it looked like we were building for the long term. Obviously KR was here for 5 years.
Before that, Wilder was here for 6 years. I don't count Gary Waddock, or we don't count Pep Clotet either.
No, team madman. We like to build around managers. We like to look to the long term. I do fear, you mentioned it, I do fear that we're becoming a modern football club in the sense we just hire and fire managers like that. And that's not what I want, because, and I don't think it's what majority of our football, of our fan base want, I should say, because that's not who we are. We've shown that that's not a recipe for sustainable, anything sustainable culture around the football club, sustainable league position. there's so much that, obviously as our EFL expert, you've seen Watford, you've seen other clubs just churn through managers. And can you think of one where that cycle has worked?
I mean, Watford has worked a few times. They've gone on one promotion, a fair few times, just by hiring and firing managers. But you got to have the money to do that. You got to have the infrastructure.
Yep.
The way that Watford are able to do it is because they get 25,000 every week at Vicarage Road, and they're able to do that and put that against their balance sheet, and they're able to recoup that income. So whereas we can't, we financially we cannot do that.
Yeah.
So
that's the other thing is, I will not financially recover from it. I mean, this is now going around in my head. But like I said, we already mentioned it, the fact that this is their sixth manager. We've been through, obviously, I think that the rough total is about 4 million quid in transfer fee, and then obviously wage packets and all that kind of stuff paid on players in the 25-26 summer. The most recent, obviously the last January window, quite a lot of money spent. And all this on top of the fact we're trying to build a new stadium, which still hasn't started construction yet. And there's just so many things going on. Like you said, we've heard zip from Dusan Bogdanovic. We know he's a former footballer, and we know he was at some point a football agent. And this is a mistake that Grant Ferguson and Tim Williams made when they came into the post. They did next to zero communication. Obviously, we all remember when it was it Tim Williams in one of his first interviews, he called us customers. And like the uproar from that. Obviously it's different people. But as we said, twice, sacking manager too late. Again, lack of communication several times on the bounce. This doesn't seem to be a board or an ownership structure that's learning from its mistakes, which they claimed they were going to do.
Yeah, it's a definition of insanity, isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again. There's no stability. The last 2 years, there's been no stability whatsoever, whether it be in the dugout, whether it be in the board, whether it be our player recruitment team, even. Whether it be, who actually has the majority share of the club, whether it be, trying to have a smooth process into, building a new stadium. There's been nothing that has been consistent and has had any form of stability. And you're right, Sam. If Aaron Ramsey gets off to a good start, say, I don't know, hypothetically, we're 7 points clear in second, we're 7 points clear of third by January, and Cardiff, they're struggling to get rid of Brian Barry Murphy. Yeah, we're going to pay for your contract up front. We want you to come here, Cardiff boy. He's not going to say no, is he? Let's be fucking real about this.
Nah. And then we're back in the same situation that they were after Manning, who was obviously their first hire. He not stabbed him in the back, but
he did stab him in the back.
I was thinking of kind of a better phrasing, but that's, he did kind of...
He had his head turned and he acted incredibly unprofessionally, and he's never admitted to it.
Yeah, he embarrassed them because, like I said, he was their guy. They were talking about the long term, all that kind of stuff, and then he walks out on them. Then they said the same thing with Des, sacked him a year later, which I'm not saying was a bad idea. In hindsight, the run was shocking, but the swiftness that... This is going to sound like a weird comparison, but when Leeds sacked Bielsa and brought in Jesse Marsh in literally 2 or 3 days afterwards, it was similar because Leeds fans love Bielsa. He was a god to them. Des wasn't at that level with us, but local boy, Oxford fan, taking us up to the Championship to so quickly sack Des and then bring in Rowett, that I think it's bad optics without, acknowledging how it looked. I've got no problem with, needing to act quickly, and obviously that worked out in our favour in the end because we've survived in 24-25. But the optics, again, we're talking about the lack of communication, and the small communication we get is so shoddy.
You haven't even pointed out about when when Des was originally sacked, and a poor 6-line sentence when Manning before that, when he left, he had about a 3 or 4 paragraph about how disappointing the club were, and it was only, I think, I'm still convinced, only after the backlash and the comments that were going on all social media pages that was when Grant Ferguson, he came out with a statement 2 or 3 days later, but then went on the radio and used the excuse of that we wanted Des to, have his say first before we do. No, I didn't buy that whatsoever. They would have kept it very quiet. I don't think there's anything wrong, with trying to keep a lid on things, because at the end of the day, whether us fans like it or not, it is a private business. But there are other things that you say, as we have been told that we are paying customers. You think that we are paying for a product, and we would like to know a little bit about what is going on and how you will be returning us on our investment in you on that product.
That's the other thing, is that that's such a good point, that they are treating us like customers after acknowledging that was a bad thing to say, and they themselves have come out and said that they see themselves as custodians, as this is our club, they're just taking care of it and all that kind of stuff. Their actions are speaking louder than their words. Like, I don't want press releases about every single staff departure.
No.
But I'm just thinking, like, Scott Mitchell's departure, for example. That's our head of recruitment. Just something from the club to say, look, yes, our head of recruitment's gone, especially because it's literally, I think it was like a week before the window opened. There was nothing. And just so it would at least calm us a little bit in thinking that, well, what the fuck has just happened to our transfer strategy if the head of recruitment has just gone to Leyton Orient?
Yeah.
And now, and obviously, we've talked about time and time again the issues that we've had with the recruitment between Scott Mitchell and Ed Waldron in terms of our championship transfer windows. But there's so little that we are. I think there's actually very few positives you can say so far of this ownership. Like, let's go through them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they take full control in the season. We almost get relegated, partly because they sack KR too late.
Too late.
Okay, they bring in Manning. Obviously, he leaves for Bristol City. They couldn't help that, really.
They could have done. I was going to say they could have done, maybe. If his contract was to be believed and it was a rolling contract, they could have tied him down and said, you got to stay here, X, Y, Z, or do you for breach of contract. But, also, football is a ruthless game. Championship
club, we on a personal level, we didn't begrudge Liam Manning for that. It was the fact that what he said literally 2 days before he left. But in that window, they recruited really, really well. Mark Harris, Ruben Rodriguez, Josh McEachran is a smart bit of recruitment to bring in a journeyed, an experienced 6. Obviously, James Beadle they brought in on loan, and then obviously had to replace him in January with Jamie Cumming after Beadle's loan was terminated and all that kind of thing. That was a really good window. Then appoint Des. You've got everyone on side because obviously Oxford boy and all that kind of thing. It doesn't start the best. Goes into January and... Oh, Christ. What was our January window there? It was Will Goodwin. Tyler Burry.
Yeah.
Bennett
came in January? Or was it just before Joe Bennett?
Bennett was December on a free transfer.
I'll still take that.
Yeah. Edwards obviously signed on a permanent transfer. Jamie Cumming came in after Beadle when...
Kid from Sunderland was 10.
Jay Mateta?
Yeah.
That played what, like
2 games?
5 minutes, maybe?
Yeah.
And obviously we got done for the admin stuff. which that's another black mark against them. But end of that season obviously comes with promotion. Amazing. Ahead of schedule. We were all like, we weren't sure, even though we were, I think we were top or we were second by some distance when Manning left.
Yeah.
Then first championship summer, again, pretty good. Brought in some championship experience. Started like a house on fire. We already mentioned the sacking of Des. Bring in a proven championship manager in Gary Rowett. Another, I think, obviously in hindsight, and I think I said at the time, to give Rowett such a long contract, I think was a mistake.
Yeah.
But obviously then we come to the fact that you probably wouldn't have got him if you only gave him a 6-month deal. Although he did it less than, didn't he?
I'll also point out, Sam, the other black mark from the board. Do you remember the fiasco when they said that they sold too many season tickets at the start of the championship season, 2 seasons ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another black mark. Like, what do you mean we sold too many season tickets? And now they're like, yeah, we sold too many season tickets. Like, how can you sell too many season tickets? We didn't think to put a cap on it. Like, oh, for God's sake.
And also, obviously, the how substantial the increase in the ticket prices were for the 2 seasons in the championship.
Yep.
Like they saw that opportunity and went, let's just keep putting it up and up and up. Obviously, survival. I think survival in the championship goes down as another good, because I mean, we were all thinking we were going straight back down.
Yeah.
So that's another good. We've already talked at length about last season, but I think overall, this ownership and this board, 2 or 3 positives.
Yeah, 2 or 3 positives. Appointing
to
Des.
maybe 4 or 5 or maybe 6 negatives.
Appointing Manning.
I'm sure there's some that I've
Des.
Yeah.
Appointing Rowett. That's 3. Yeah, I'll make 3.
I was more saying promotion, obviously survival. Okay, and then the appointments. So 5 positives, and then sacking KR late, sacking Rowett late, various com stuff. Is there any stuff we haven't mentioned?
Fucking up 2 pre-seasons, especially last year.
Yeah.
And now this year,
Indonesia
potentially.
Pre-season. Yeah. I'd say there's probably, from the top of my head, for every positive there are 2 negatives under this ownership in this board.
Yep, they shouldn't still be learning either. They've been here overall, as you say, for about 5 years now. So,
well, it's not even 4 yet.
That's what I mean. It's ridiculous.
I mean, like I think we've said a couple of times in the past that there was going to be a certain amount of a learning curve, because parts of this ownership have been at Manchester United, Internazionale, who are obviously 2 super clubs, at least in historically. Obviously, Man United with with their revenues, and then DC United, which there's not a lot you can take from being in control of an MLS club to apply to anywhere else, because the MLS system is so weird. But the fact that, so I think we said at the time they can be given a little bit of leeway on that. But the fact that, like we said, they've made a couple of them the same mistakes multiple times.
Yeah, as we've pointed out, so many mistakes that they've made over and over again, and they don't seem to be learning from their mistakes. And I think that for a lot of fans now this season, this could well be last chance saloon, because I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember a lot of the ferocity that was shown at Kassam. Don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near in the same stratosphere, and the fact that how much that Kassam was squeezing, the living daylights out of the club. But it's going to be more that, what are you doing? What is going on? It's given the impression that, you don't know what you're doing. And that chant will be shouted at the board a lot. So I think especially this season of all seasons, there will be a lot more eyes and a lot more attention up above the dugout rather than actually in the dugout.
100%. Yeah. You saw what happened at Plymouth. Obviously, the season they went down, they obviously appointed Wayne Rooney, and it went badly. And obviously, while there were chants towards Wayne Rooney and demands for him to get out of the club, it was all majority of the frosty was turned on the owner, because he consistently year after year after year kind of mismanaged Plymouth Argyle. So, like I say, we don't want it to get to that point, but if we can, if members of the board for some reason got to this point in the podcast, much better communication is absolutely necessary. Stop making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And just like, I think the key thing is, it sometimes feels like even though, there's been fairly ambivalent to the board up to this point, it sometimes feels like the board think we're at war with our own higher-ups.
Yeah, I completely understand and see where that's coming from. Just how cold sometimes some of the statements seem to be, like actually reading them, actually being typed out and worded as business statements, when football is a very different kind of industry.
Yeah.
You got to walk that very fine line between yes, it is a business, but it is also, quite literally, in Oxfordshire's case, it is a blue plaque club.
Yeah. So, if the third bit of advice we can give is, remember, we're all on the same side here. We're all supporting Oxford United. We all want this football club to do the best it can do. I think one of the key kind of takeaways is, we can be quite forgiving if you own up to stuff and actually change it. We will be forgiving because we understand that these things can happen. But when you're making the same mistakes over and over and over again and changing nothing, that's when antipathy will start to develop.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, like I said, that's the conversation and the kind of ranting that I know Connor and I have been building up for a long time about the situation with the board. So it's all out in the open. It's all kind of off our chests. So if we come back to have this conversation at some point during the campaign, then the board has really fucked up. But thank you so much, folks, for watching this week's emergency episode of Walking the London Road. As planned, we're going to be back on the first week of July. Obviously, by then, the fixture will have been released. And hopefully we'll have at least a new player in the door, because that's another thing that's happened, is obviously since Bloomfield has been sacked, some of the players that we were targeting have gone elsewhere. But please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Massively helps out the channel in the algorithm. Follow us at our socials, you can see on screen. And like I say, myself, Connor, and will see you back here first week of July for the first proper episode of the 26-27 campaign.